The Galactic Defense Coalition had standards impossibly high, ruthlessly enforced standards that sorted the universe's sentient species into a tidy little hierarchy of usefulness. And humans, well, humans ranked somewhere between decorative moss and emergency rations on that scale. Look at them, Commander Zelvrokian muttered, his 7 eyes blinking in asynchronous disapproval as the latest batch of human recruits shuffled into the orbital training facility. Soft skin, brittle bones, and absolutely zero natural weapons. It's like watching children play soldier. His second-in-command, Lieutenant. Razi clicked her mandibles in what passed for laughter among the Kesnik. Yet the Council insists we integrate them politics. She spat the word like it was a particularly foul-tasting insect the humans moved through the station's vast atrium, their eyes wide with that particular mix of awe and terror that only creatures discovering there at the bottom of a very tall food chain can muster. DC protocol dictated that all new species be assimilated into the ranks based on their natural abilities. The apex predators became the elite forces. The armored species became the tanks. The venomous or toxic species became the saboteurs, and humans became, well, that was still being determined, which explained their presence on Station Omega-9, the Coalition's most advanced combat training facility across the galaxy. Commanders were pulling their sensory appendages out, trying to figure out where these bipedal oddities, fifth humans, had decided to join the Coalition against the Void Scourge at possibly the worst time, right when the borderlands were experiencing the heaviest incursions in centuries. The Coalition needed every able body or gelatinous mass, in some cases on the front lines, but humans, what exactly were they good for? Among the latest batch of recruits was one particularly unassuming specimen. She wasn't the tallest, the strongest, or the loudest of the group. In fact, if there was anything remarkable about recruit T. Choi, it was her complete and utter unremarkability. Average height, average build with the standard issue short military haircut, and the same wide-sized look of mingled fascination and terror as her compatriots. One lieutenant, Razi said suddenly, one chitinous limb extending toward Choi. She moves differently. Delvroyan's 7 eyes swiveled independently, taking in the human from multiple angles simultaneously. Elaborate. The others are displaying tension patterns, elevated shoulders, rapid ocular movement, increased respiratory rates that one maintains a steady gait-controlled breathing, and her visual focus is systematic, not erratic. The commander made a dismissive gurgling sound from his central breathing sac. So one human is marginally less terrified than the others. Should we award her a medal? I'm simply noting an anomaly, Commander. Duly noted, Lieutenant. Now shall we proceed with making these creatures marginally less useless to the Coalition's efforts? Little did Commander Zelvroyan know that Recruit Choi would soon render his entire classification system obsolete, and it would all start with a chance encounter that would rewrite the Coalition's understanding of both humans and their most fearsome soldiers. The Vazrathi were without exception the most terrifying species in the known galaxy. Evolution had crafted them into perfect killing machines. 3M of corded muscle, retractable bone blades, redundant vital organs, and jaws that could snap a cystic exoskeleton like it was made of candy. Their homeworld, a death trap of a planet with triple Earth's gravity and an atmosphere rich in hallucinogenic compounds, had ensured only the strongest, most aggressive, and most paranoid of their species survived. They were also, as luck would have it, absolutely terrible at following orders. The Vazrathi integration experiment has been challenging. General Oruru explained to the human commanding officer, a Colonel Daniels, as they watched the briefing holo. The translucent blue image showed a Vazrathi tearing through a training dummy with disturbing enthusiasm. They are unquestionably our most effective ground troops, but they have this unfortunate tendency to eat their commanding officers when under stress, Colonel. Daniels blinked. I'm sorry, did you say eat only sometimes? General Aru said, waving a tentacle dismissively. Usually they just maim. The point is we need to find a way to harness their combat effectiveness without the, shall we say, collateral damage. The human officer's face did that fascinating thing where it drained of color. And you want to try pairing them with humans, the physically weakest species in the Coalition, General, with all due respect. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. On the contrary, Colonel, it's a controlled experiment. We've observed some unusual interactions between your species and the Vazrathi. Nothing conclusive yet, but enough to warrant further investigation. What General Uruks didn't mention was that the unusual interactions consisted of exactly one incident where a human janitor had accidentally wandered into a Vazrai containment area, and rather than being immediately eviscerated had been sniffed curiously, and then ignored. It wasn't much to base an experimental program on, but the coalition was desperate, and desperate times called for questionable decision-making masked as scientific inquiry, and that was how Recruit Choi found herself standing outside Training Arena 7E, clutching her data pad and wondering if her life insurance policy covered dismemberment by alien apex predator, or if that fell under Act of God, Recruit Choi. The Kazateclectant clicked at her. Your assignment is Vasarati Trainee Designation, VZ4OZ27. You will conduct basic cooperation exercises. As outlined in your briefing materials, Choi glanced down at her datapad. The briefing materials consisted of a single page that read in large, friendly letters, "Try not to die." Below that, in smaller print, in case of aggression, emergency sedation protocols can be activated via your wrist communicator success rate, 17%. That's not very reassuring. She muttered. The lieutenant's mandibles clacked in what might have been sympathy. If it helps believe the actual success rate is closer to 19%. The data is still coming in fantastic. Troy took a deep breath. Any tips for not becoming lunch? Our xenobiologists suggest avoiding sudden movements, maintaining eye contact without staring, and not showing fear. The lieutenant paused, though I should note that fear has a distinct odor which humans cannot control, so that last bit of advice is largely useless. Right, don't move. Suddenly don't stare. Don't be afraid. Even though fear is involuntary, anything else, yes, your physical training scores indicate you're in the upper percentile for human reflexes. Use them. With that cheerful send-off, the lieutenant tapped a sequence into the door panel, and the heavy barrier slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The training arena was vast, easily the size of 3 football fields with various obstacles. Terrain features and training equipment scattered throughout. Choi stepped inside her boots, echoing on the metallic floor. The door slid shut behind her with a sound that felt uncomfortably final. For several long moments nothing happened. The arena remained still and silent. Then a low rumbling growl emanated from somewhere to her left, raising the hair on her arms. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her head. The Vasrati was even more imposing in person than in the briefing hollows. V's 437 was crouched on a raised platform, its iridescent scales shifting between deep purple and midnight blue as it moved. Its eyes, all 4 of them, were fixed on her with predatory intensity. "Hello," Joy said, impressed by how steady her voice sounded. "I'm your new training partner." The Vasati uncoiled from its crouch, rising to its full height. 3M had seemed like an abstract number in the briefing. In person it was terrifying. BZ-437 tilted its head, examining her with obvious curiosity, and what she desperately hoped wasn't hunger. Then it spoke, its voice a rumbling bass that she felt more than heard. "You small weak." The coalition's translation tech rendered its speech into stilted but understandable English. "Why send you previous trainers bigger, stronger, still useless?" Choi considered her response carefully. Fear was pumping through her system, but beneath it was something else. A calm, analytical part of her brain that had always activated in crisis situations. "Size isn't everything," she said finally. "And I'm not here to control you. I'm here to work with you." The Vazrai made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Work with me." Small human work with Vazrai. It took a step forward, its massive clawed feet making the floor vibrate. "Show me why I not should eat you now. Save time." Choi didn't back away. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she held her ground. "Because I'm not afraid of you." It was a blatant lie. Of course she was terrified, but as her old drill instructor used to say, sometimes you got to fake it till you make it, or fake it till you're dead. The Vasati inhaled deeply, its nostrils flaring lie. It rumbled, "I smell fear." "Of course I'm afraid," Choi admitted, changing tactics. "I'd be stupid not to be, but I'm still standing here, aren't I?" This seemed to give V's 437 pause. It circled, her slowly, its claws clicking against the floor. Interesting. Previous trainers pretend no fear, lie badly. You admit fear, yet stand ground. It stopped directly in front of her, perhaps not completely useless. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but Choi would take it. "Let's start with something simple. The first exercise is a coordination drill." The Vazrathi bared its teeth. all several hundred of them arranged in 3 horrifying rows. I do not take orders from prey. It's not an order, Croy said evenly. It's a suggestion, and I'm not prayed I'm your partner. For a tense moment, she thought VZ-437 might lunge at her instead. It made that rumbling laugh-like sound again. We see run drill, if boring, maybe eat you after all. And so began the strangest partnership. In coalition history, the observation deck above training arena 70B was crowded with officials from various species, all watching with a mix of scientific curiosity and morbid fascination. Commander Zelvroyan's 7 eyes were fixed on the scene below, where the human and the Vazrathi were running their 4th coordination drill of the day. It's been 3 cycles, he said, not bothering to hide his astonishment. The human is still alive. Lieutenant Razik clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. More than alive, Commander. Look at their progress metrics. The holographic display showed a steadily rising line graph. VZ-437's cooperation scores have increased by 42%. Since pairing with the human, the lieutenant continued. Previous Vazrathi subjects showed an average decrease of 23% over the same period, usually ending with the consumption of their training partners. General Oruru floated closer to the window, his gelatinous form rippling with excitement, and observed their physical synchronization. The Vazrathi is moderating its pace to match the humans below. Choi and V's 4337 were navigating an obstacle course, moving with surprising harmony given their size difference. When they reached a wall too high for the human to scale easily, the Vazrathi did something unprecedented. It crouched down, allowing Troy to use its back as a step. Voluntary assistance behavior, whispered one of the xenobiologists, furiously taking notes. First documented case in any Vazrathi subject. Colonel Daniels, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. What exactly is happening here? How is she doing this? General Oruruk's color shifted to a thoughtful blue. We're still analyzing the data, but we have some theories. The Vazrai evolved as pack hunters, but their extreme aggression eventually led them to become solitary predators. Their social instincts remain, however, buried beneath layers of violent conditioning. That doesn't explain why this particular human can access those instincts when other species can't. The colonel, pressed Commander Zelvroyan, reluctantly joined the conversation. There may be certain biochemical factors. Human adrenal responses produce compounds similar to Vazrai dominance markers. In layman's terms, when Urekwi experiences fear but stands her ground, she might be inadvertently signaling strength to the Vazrathi. Sir Rafia response impresses it. Colonel Daniels looked incredulous. Vazrathi respects strength. Colonel, not size, not species, just strength. And perhaps the greatest strength is facing fear without retreating. The commander sounded like the words physically pained him to say. Blow. The training session was concluding as Choi and VZ-437 completed the final obstacle. Something remarkable happened. The Vazrathi lowered its massive head, pressing its forehead briefly against the human's shoulder before stalking off toward its rest area. The observation deck erupted in a cacophony of exclamations in a dozen different languages. Did he just? That was a pack-bonding gesture. Unprecedented. General Oruru's form rippled with excitement. I believe, colleagues, that we may have stumbled upon the solution to our Vazrat's integration problem, and possibly discovered humanity's role in our coalition. 2 weeks into the training program, the inevitable happened. The coalition, ever eager to push boundaries in the name of progress and more effective killing machines, decided to stress test the human-Vazrathi partnership. They did this by simulating a combat scenario in which a squad of drone attackers targeted Choi while she was separated from VZ's 437. The test was supposed to measure how quickly the Vizrai would abandon its human partner when not directly supervised. What the test actually measured was how quickly a Vazrathi could tear through reinforced battle drones when properly motivated. The answer, it turned out, was alarmingly fast. Choi had been navigating a narrow corridor in the training arena when the attack drones descended, their weapon systems loaded with training stunners that, while non-lethal, were programmed to hurt like hell. She'd managed to dodge the first volley and was returning fire with her own training weapon when the wall beside her literally exploded inward as 437 burst through the metal barrier like it was made of tissue paper. Its scales flushed to deep crimson, the Vazrathi equivalent of seeing red, It moved so quickly that the recording drones could barely track it. Reducing the attack squad to scrap metal in seconds when it was over, the Vasarati stood amid the wreckage, its massive chest heaving 4 eyes, scanning for additional threats. Finding none, it turned to Choi, who was staring in undisguised shock. "You okay?" Vaz 437 rumbled, its translation unit struggling to convey what seemed to be genuine concern. "I'm fine," she assured it, holstering her weapon. "But you just destroyed a reinforced wall to get to me. That's unexpected." The Vasarati made a dismissive sound. "Wall in way you in danger," as if that explained everything in the observation deck. The silence was absolute. Then Colonel Daniels started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound that suggested he was either having a revelation or a breakdown. "Ease their pack bonding," he gasped between laughs. "All this time we've been treating the Vasrai like solitary apex predators, but they're pack hunters. They just have incredibly high standards for who they consider pack." General Uruk's color had shifted to a contemplative lavender, and somehow this particular human meets those standards. Not just this human. Colonel Daniel said, regaining his composure. "I've been reviewing the data. The Vasrai respond differently to humans in general compared to other species. It's just that Recruit Choi has the right combination of traits to trigger their full pack bonding response." Commander Zelvroyan's 7 eyes narrowed simultaneously. "What traits precisely?" "Courage despite fear, respectful treatment without subservience, direct communication without aggression." The colonel smiled thinly. "In other words, traits we've been training into our soldiers for centuries." The implications were staggering. If humans physically, the weakest species in the coalition, could form effective partnerships with the Vasrai, physically the strongest, the entire power dynamic of the galactic military was about to shift dramatically. The coalition's xenobiologists, xenopsychologists, and various other specialists with xeno in their titles spent the next month studying the human Vasati phenomenon, with the frantic energy of academics who suddenly found their field relevant to military funding. Their conclusions, published in an emergency bulletin to Coalition Command, were both illuminating and slightly embarrassing for everyone who wasn't human. Humans, the report stated, possess a unique neurobiological response to threat stimuli. Unlike most sentient species who either freeze in fear or respond with immediate aggression, humans exhibit a complex threat assessment protocol that allows them to experience fear while simultaneously planning strategic responses. This courage response produces biochemical markers that Vasati instinctively recognized as packed leadership qualities. In simpler terms, humans got scared but didn't run away, and Vigrati found this deeply impressive. But there was more, the report continued. Additionally, human social structures emphasize cooperative leadership rather than pure dominance hierarchies. When humans issue commands, they typically include explanatory context and acknowledge the agency of their subordinates, a communication style that aligns with Vasrai pack dynamics, but which most coalition species have failed to employ, instead attempting to establish dominance through intimidation. In other words, humans asked nicely instead of ordering, and Vasati appreciated the courtesy for Recruit Choi. All this academic fascination with her partnership was secondary to the practical reality of working with VZ-437, whom she had begun to call Vex for simplicity's sake. Their training sessions had evolved from basic coordination exercises to complex tactical simulations, and they were consistently outperforming every mixed species team on the station. "Your heart rate elevates before danger," Vex explained to her one day as they rested between drills. "Before senses detect, before you consciously know. I smell change. Good warning system." "Are you saying I have a subconscious danger sense that you can smell?" Choi asked, amused. "Yes, useful." Vex's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which she had learned was its version of a shrug. "Many predators on your world historically. Yes, though we've kind of become the apex predators over time." Vex made a rumbling sound that she now recognized as laughter. "Small soft predators, strange evolution," says the 3M lizard with bone swords for arms. "Not lizard mammals like you, just better." Their easy banter was interrupted by a station-wide alert. The lighting shifted to red, and the announcement system blared in multiple languages. "Attention, all personnel, void incursion detected in Sector 7. This is not a drill. All combat or ready units report to deployment." Bay Alpha, Joy, and Vex exchanged glances. They were still technically in training, not classified as combat ready, but Sector 7 was perilously close to the station's position. "We go," Vex said. "Already moving toward the exit. We haven't been cleared for combat deployment." Choi reminded him, though she was also gathering her gear, void creatures, not care about clearance. "We fight, we good together." You couldn't argue with that logic. They were good together. Possibly the most effective human Vassarati pair in the Coalition. And if the Void Scourge was breaking through this close to the station, they'd need every fighter they could muster as they rushed toward deployment bay. Alpha, they passed other mixed species units heading in the same direction. The looks they received ranged from surprise to outright shock. A human and a Vassata moving in perfect sync without restraints or armed guards keeping them separated. Commander Zilvroyan was coordinating the deployment when they arrived. His 7 eyes widened at the sight of them. Recruit Choi, verse 437. "You're not authorized for combat deployment, Vex," growled a sound that made several nearby soldiers take involuntary steps. Backward Choi placed a calming hand on his arm, a gesture that caused further consternation among the witnesses. "Commander, with respect, we're one of the most effective teams. On this station, the Void Scourge is hitting Sector 7 hard. According to the alerts, you need us out there." The commander's respiratory sac inflated with indignation. "This is highly irregular, sir," interrupted Colonel Daniel, stepping forward. "I recommend field authorization for the human Vassati units, all of them. Choi glanced around and realized that they weren't the only human Vazrathi pair to respond. To the alert, at least a dozen other pairs stood ready, each human standing calmly beside their massive partner An Iceland of order in the chaotic deployment bay. The commander looked like he might argue further, but a fresh alarm cut through the noise. The Void Scourge had breached the outer defense perimeter. Decision time was over. "Field authorization granted," he said tersely. "Try not to get yourselves killed or eaten." Headed with a pointed look at the Vassarati contingent, Vex made that rumbling laugh sound again. No 8 alleys today as they boarded the deployment shuttle. Choi couldn't help but reflect on the bizarre turn her military career had taken 6 months ago. She'd been a fresh recruit expected to find some minor support role in the Coalition's war against the Void. Now she was deploying into combat with a 3M tall apex predator who had somehow decided she was worth following the universe. Had a strange sense of humor. The battle against the Void Scourge was chaotic, terrifying, and revelatory. In equal measure, the creatures, if they could be called that, defied conventional physics, their amorphous bodies shifting between states of matter as they attacked. They were vulnerable to energy weapons, but seemed to absorb kinetic impacts, making traditional firearms useless. The human Vasrai teams, however, discovered an unexpected advantage. The humans' ability to adapt tactics on the fly complemented the Vasrai's raw combat power perfectly. Where other Coalition units struggled with rigid battle protocols, the human Vasrathi pair improvised, communicating in the abbreviated shorthand of soldiers who trust each other implicitly. Choi and Vex moved through the battlefield like dancers in a lethal ballet. She spotted vulnerabilities in the Void creatures' constantly shifting forms. He exploited them with devastating precision when a surge of Void entities threatened to overwhelm their position. She didn't need to give complex orders. A simple "Vex, the left flank is collapsing" was enough for him to understand exactly what needed to be done. By the time the battle ended, with the last of the Void Scourge driven back beyond the defensive perimeter, the evidence was irrefutable. The human Vasrati teams had suffered fewer casualties, achieved more objectives, and adapted more effectively than any other mixed species units in the aftermath. As the Coalition forces regrouped and tended to their wounded, Choi found herself summoned to an emergency council meeting. The highest honor or worst punishment, depending on how you looked at it, a junior recruit could receive. Vex insisted on accompanying her, a request that would have been denied outright just weeks earlier. Now the guard simply eyed the massive predator wearily but made no move to stop him. The council chamber was designed to accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes, from the microscopic and zoo collective to the massive gas giant dwellers like the Helios. Choi and Vex were directed to a central platform, where they stood surrounded by the most powerful military leaders in the known galaxy. General Oruru began the proceedings, his gelatinous form pulsing with formal colors. Recruit T. Choi Basratha designated, VZ 437. Your performance in today's combat operation has been noteworthy. Thank you. General Choi responded, maintaining parade rest beside her. Vex stood unnaturally, still only his 4 eyes moving as they continuously scanned the room for threats beyond noteworthy. Commander Zelroyan amended, his 7 eyes blinking in what might have been reluctant admiration. The data is clear. The human Vasrati combat units outperformed all other mixed species teams by a significant margin. Which brings us to the purpose of this council, continued General O'Rourke. We must reassess our integration strategies in light of this new information. For centuries we have assigned roles based on physical capabilities and natural weaponry. But today's event suggests that this approach may be outdated. A Helio-Ori representative, appearing as a shimmering hologram of superheated plasma, spoke next. The proposal before this council is to establish a new class of combat unit, human Vasati integration teams with humans, serving as tactical commanders and Vasrati as frontline combatants. The chamber erupted in multilingual chatter. The idea was revolutionary or heretical, depending on one's perspective. Humans relegated to support roles until now would suddenly be elevated to command positions over the coalition's most powerful warriors. If I may speak, Choi said. Raising her voice above the din, the chamber quieted all attention. Turning to her, this isn't about command, it's about partnership. Explain, demanded the CZ General, mandibles clicking irritably. The reason we work well together isn't because I give orders and Vex follows them. It's because we recognize each other's strengths and adapt accordingly. Sometimes I take the lead, sometimes he does. The key is mutual respect. Vase rumbled in agreement. Human understands. Not try to dominate, not show fear. Treat as equal. His translated voice carried clearly through the chamber. Vasrathi respects strength, human strength, different. Mental strength, courage, strength, partnership strength. The council members exchanged glances, communications passing between them in ways humans couldn't perceive. Finally, General O'Rourke spoke again. Your perspective is enlightening. Perhaps our entire approach to coalition integration has been fundamentally flawed. We have been so focused on categorizing species by their physical attributes that we overlooked the power of complementary strengths. Commander. Zelroyan looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant, but he nodded in reluctant agreement. I propose a formal revision to coalition combat doctrine, effective immediately. We will establish a pilot program for human Vrathi integrated units with Recruit Choi and VZ437 as the program's advisors. The motion passed unanimously, though several council members looked like they might be questioning their life choices as they left the chamber. Vex bumped his massive shoulder gently against Choice, a Vasrai gesture of camaraderie that would have been terrifying just weeks ago now. It felt natural. So she said, I guess we're changing galactic military doctrine? Yes, Vex agreed. Funny small human, big change. The universe works in mysterious ways, not mysterious, Vex corrected her. Just unexpected, like humans look weak are not weak. I'll take that as a compliment. Was compliment. Vex's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, his version of a smile. Part 6. Months after the Battle of Sector 7, the corridors of Station Omega-9 had transformed. Where once Vasrati had been kept isolated from other species, now they moved freely alongside their human partners. The initial pilot program had expanded rapidly, as more humans discovered an aptitude for working with the fearsome predators, and more Vasrati found themselves oddly drawn to these small, soft creatures who faced danger without flinching. The effectiveness of the human Vasrati teams had not gone unnoticed by the Void Scourge either. Intelligence reports suggested that the extra-dimensional invaders were actually avoiding sectors patrolled by the new integrated units, the first time in recorded history that the Void had shown anything resembling tactical retreat. In her new office, actually a converted storage room, but she wasn't complaining. Choi reviewed the latest deployment schedules as senior advisor to the integration program. She now held a rank equivalent to Major, a meteoric rise from recruit that had caused no small amount of grumbling among the traditional command structure. Vex lounged in a specially reinforced chair. Nearby, meticulously sharpening his retractable bone blades, a Vasrai relaxation technique that most other species found deeply unsettling. 20 new teams deploying next cycle, she told him, looking up from her datapad. That brings us to over 100 human Vazi pairs in active service. Good number Vex-approved Void creatures, Learn fear now better than before, Akaimi announced. A visitor and the door slid open to reveal Commander Zelvroyant, the officer, had gradually shifted from outright skepticism to grudging respect for the program, though he still seemed perpetually surprised that humans had found a niche in the coalition's complex ecosystem. Major Choi. He greeted her, pointedly not addressing Vex directly. Some old habits died hard. The Council has reviewed your latest proposal for expanded integration, and Choi prompted. When he didn't immediately continue all 7 of his eyes blinked simultaneously, a sign of extreme discomfort. It has been approved effective next cycle. We will begin trials for human integration with Marie's hive minds, Kondon berserkers, and Helior plasma forms. She couldn't keep the smile from her face. The 3 species he'd named were among the most difficult to integrate into mixed units, each for different reasons. If humans could form effective partnerships with them, as they had with the Vassarati, the entire coalition combat doctrine would need to be rewritten from scratch. Thank you for the update, Commander. We'll begin preparation immediately. When he'd gone, Vex made his rumbling laugh sound his face when Appa proved priceless. He's coming round, Choi said charitably. Slowly, very slowly, like evolution. Maybe in million years have sense of humor. She laughed, still somewhat amazed at how comfortable she'd become with a creature that most of the galaxy regarded with abject terror. You know what the funniest part of all this is? Humans spent our entire history thinking we'd join a galactic community as either the conquerors or the conquered. No one ever considered we might end up as the diplomats. BX tilted his massive head. Not diplomats, translators between strength and wisdom, between instinct and planning. He extended one clawed hand palm up, a gesture he'd learned from humans, between fear and courage. Choi placed her much smaller hand in his, a gesture of trust that would have been unthinkable months ago. Partners, she agreed. Otnus BX confirmed, 4 eyes blinking in his alien smile. Universe not ready, and indeed, as human Visati teams spread throughout coalition space, as ancient power structures realigned around this unexpected partnership, the universe did seem thoroughly unprepared for what was coming. The Void Scourge, for all its extra-dimensional horror, had inadvertently triggered an evolution in galactic warfare, one that placed a small, physically unimpressive species from a backwater planet at the center of the coalition's most elite fighting forces, all because one unremarkable human recruit had stood her ground when faced with the galaxy's most feared predator. And that predator had recognized something worth following. The universe, as it turned out, had a sense of irony as well as humor.